Fighters. Today on the podcast, I am interviewing Patrick Ungashik. He is going to be with us at Mile High Profit Summit. He's running a workshop on how to grow your business and create your exit plan. For those that don't know what that means, it's how you're going to sell your damn business and what it's going to take to sell it, what it's worth, how to set yourself up for a successful exit if that is what you're choosing to pursue. So anyway, tune in here today. You'll get a couple things of value for you as you're growing your business from my interview with Patrick. Let's do it. Patrick, welcome to the fight. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tom. I'm glad to be here in the fight.
Absolutely. So you live in Florida, but you're in North Carolina at your other house because it's too hot in Florida. Is that what's going on now?
Too hot, and right now too wet and windy.
Oh man, what part of Florida?
All the way down at the bottom on the Gulf Coast side, a little island called Marco Island.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And where are you from originally?
I grew up in a few spots. St. Louis, I call St. Louis my hometown because I lived there when I was a kid. Lifelong baseball Cardinals fan ever since.
Yep.
And you said you're from Illinois?
I'm from outside of Chicago, and we were Cubs fans, and we have relatives down in Troy, Illinois, that are the biggest Cards fans I've ever met. And nothing but arguments all the time when the family gets together. So
we're not supposed to like each other based on just that, right?
That's right. But anyway, we're not here to talk about baseball. We're here to talk about what you're talking about at our Mile High Profit Summit for our VIPs.
That's right.
And I'm it's all about your title that we have for you here is The Growth Myth, Creating Your Exit Plan. And I'd love to get into that a little bit, but certainly before we do, I'd love if you could give maybe a 30,000 foot view of who you are and what you do and how you've helped people. I know you've been in this game of helping people exit for over 30 years now?
That's right. Yeah. I started out as a investment banker. Right out of school, I was the junior guy on a team. But Tom, I started, and that was more than 30 years ago, as you said. I started from the very beginning, even when I was the kid in the back of the room who was just taking notes and following along, that, a lot of business owners can build really great companies, but building a great company and growing a business does not necessarily lead to a happy exit, which I think is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So then I've founded more than a few companies along the way, and now I am an owner and I lead an exit planning consulting business and a wealth management firm. And I'm also a minority partner in an investment banking firm and a private equity firm. So I do a variety of things.
You do. And you mentioned a happy exit. How do you define that?
Well, I mean, the client defines it, the business owner defines it, and everybody has a little bit different spin. I'll tell you, there's some themes that come up with pretty much everybody who owns a business. Top of the list is financial. I mean, we're in this to make an honest buck, right? And if I'm building a company one day, I want to convert what I created in my business into value in my checking account. So there's a financial part of a happy exit. I'll tell you, most business owners don't stop there. You get a business owner talking about a happy exit, and I think we're going to do that at your upcoming conference. Yeah, but you'll hear things like, hey, I want to make sure my people are treated fairly. If there's any customers in the, in the picture, I don't want the customer to be left holding a bag or with services or products that are a step down from what we've been giving them. So there's usually some non-financial objectives that goes into a happy exit, but those themes tend to come up almost every single time.
Yeah, it's I don't want to hijack this too much with my thoughts, but I just see, like we talked about a little bit before we hit record, is so many business owners say they have this vision to exit, to have this big buyout or whatever you want to call it, and yet their actions today don't match the vision they say they have. That's one of my pet peeves with our contractor community is like you say you want to build a $5 million business or whatever it is, yet you can't even honor the damn commitments you're making to yourself to go to the gym or not hit the snooze button
Right.
or do your job costing or whatever the small little disciplines are. So I'm just curious, like before anyone can even fathom the idea of having an exit, what are some things that really need to be dialed in?
Well, there's a difference between building great homes or making great pizzas or building great airplanes or whatever your company does. There's a difference between being really great at that activity or in that service or that product versus building a great company. There's some overlap, but there are some pretty big differences too. And if you are a business owner and you want to have a happy exit one day and you want someone to write you a check for the value of your company and all those other goals, you and me and you, Tom, anyone who runs a business, we've got to build something that's bigger than us. You've got to build something that somebody else will want to step into, will want to acquire, will want to take over. And that involves work that, it's hard work. I think it's worth it, but it's hard work. And a lot of business owners think that their goal is to build a great company. I disagree. I think the objective is to build a great team. And then from there, you can build a great company. But they're very, very different. And if you don't do the work, it's obviously not going to happen.
Boy, I tell you, I think you nailed it there with building a great team, because if you can't get out of your own way, if this thing can't operate with other people thinking about solving problems and it's all on you, that's a problem.
Well, that's right. And so that workshop that I'm going to do for your conference, which I'm really excited about, is called The Growth Myth, because a talented business owner, again, whether you're a residential builder, commercial builder, whatever you do for a living, you can achieve a lot of growth. You can create revenue, you can create profits. But if nothing happens unless you're in the room with the customer, in the room with the architect, in the room with the sub, if nothing happens unless you're in the room, then when you walk out the door, all the value walks out the door. And that's not going to lead to a successful exit.
What have you seen is, like, if you could narrow down, like, one of the top things that totally hijacks somebody being able to sell their business.
Yeah.
Just,
top of the list is, what we just started to talk about. We call it owner dependency. The company has to not be dependent on the owner on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't mean the owner does nothing. It doesn't mean the owner never shows up, but there's a difference between supporting your team versus doing all the work, right? So number one is there has to be a level of owner dependency. Again, otherwise, the value is too much tied up in the owner or if there's partners, the multiple owners of that business. That's top of the list. And it's really hard in an industry like your guys, because your builders are probably really good at what they do, and they're used to being in the room with the customer. They're used to being in the room with the client. And they're good at it, but eventually you got to build something that's beyond you, and eventually hire a coach and develop people who can do the work, at least as good as you can.
Yeah, that's such a, the typical contractor worked in the field, starts their own business. So their default is to do the work, right? We put shit on our back and go, I'll carry it, I'll do it. And I know that was a shift for me many years ago. It's a shift for so many people. There's that stage where you have to go all in and commit to building your team, like you mentioned before. And that means they're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna lose some money on some deals. You're gonna, because you did when you were doing it,
right?
And I was talking to somebody the other day. I'm like, you get mad at your team or your sales guy because you underbid a job, but when you were the only salesperson, you underbid a job, nobody was bitching at you. You just learned from it and moved on, like coach and mentor them and understand you're going to take your lumps, but that's what it takes. Like you said, it's worth it to develop your team.
Yep. It is a true commitment. It's a commitment of time. It's absolutely a commitment of money. It's a commitment of focus. It's hard work to train someone who's not as skilled at a function or responsibility as I want them to be. I always have two choices with every minute of the day. We all do. I can stop and spend the next minute, the next hour training someone in the hopes that a month from now, a year from now, they're going to be able to do it well enough, or I can go do it myself. And if I go do it myself, I know how it's going to get done. I believe in myself. I trust in myself. And an hour from now or a month from now, it'll be done. But I didn't build the team. So it's a real focus. It's a real commitment, and it's a focus that a lot of business owners either never embrace, or they decide they don't want to embrace it, which is okay. But if you want to have a successful exit, there's got to be something there beyond you.
So over 30 years in this game, you've probably forgotten more about this than you can remember right now, right? Because you've been in the thing so long. It's like, you're in something so long, you forget some things. But if thinking back to when you started compared to now, how's the exit game changed?
What a great question. It's changed in a lot of ways. One way that it's changed, and this definitely influences your industry because you see it a lot, as family-owned businesses. Tom, the business owners we work with are usually somewhere in their 50s, maybe in their 60s, sometimes in their 40s. My point is they're not 20-year-olds who are just getting started, because those guys aren't thinking about exit yet. But 30 years ago, in a family business situation, you'd have mom and dad, and they were maybe in their mid-50s, let's say. And they'd be like, yeah, maybe we want our son, maybe we want our kids to take over the business. And when mom and dad were in their mid-50s, Junior was 30 and already had 10 years experience working in the family company, right?
Right.
Now, mom and dad are in their mid-50s, and they're going to t-ball practice and dance lessons. So we've had kids a lot later in life. Yeah. And so we see a lot of businesses that maybe they're already second generation or third generation, or maybe the existing owners really are excited about the idea of one day their kids following in their footsteps. But we go, wait a minute, you got to do the math. You're in your mid-50s and your kid's maybe still in high school. You got to do that math, and you got to be on the other side of 70 before the kid maybe even is old enough for this even to be an option. And do you want to wait that long to see whether or not Junior wants it, is mature enough, will do the work, et cetera? A lot of family-owned businesses, or a lot of individuals who like the idea of keeping it in the family, say, I'm not waiting that long. So one thing that's changed, because the demographics have changed so much, is it's a lot harder to keep it in the family if that's something you're thinking about, if you had kids a little bit later, like so many of us have.
Well, I imagine it would be also harder. I mean, I've seen less and less people go into the trades. And so a lot of kids are growing up and they're like, I want to be an influencer on social media and all this other crap. And they're not even working in their parents' business. They're not even working in the trade. So, I think for a lot of people that's off the table because they just were never interested in the business. So where does somebody all right, let's do this. How do I know my business is ready to sell? And kind of a hodgepodge of questions here because my mind's all over. It's Monday morning and I got all these things in my mind.
That's right.
Also with that, is there a time that it's better to just keep it and let it keep paying you till you die type thing versus selling it? I'm just curious, how do you know those things?
Yeah, great question. And there's some resources that we've got on our website. We'll get to that later, but also we're going to share in your guys' upcoming conference. How do you know when your business is ready to sell? We talked about one thing, which is there's got to be something beyond just you, just the owner. That's critical. Another part of it is this business has to be a bright future. Buyers, when they're acquiring a company, they're going to look at what the company has done financially in terms of its results historically, but that's only to tell them where the company has been. They're writing a check for the future. So there's got to be a bright future in terms of what this company can do going forward. It can be a formal document like a business plan, or it can just be a great story, but it's that team and it's that plan and that vision for what this company is going to do in the future is why buyers now open up their checkbook. Those would be probably, there's a bunch of other stuff in order to get a company ready for sale, but that's more dotting the I's and crossing the T's in terms of making your financials look and read a certain way. I think the most important is there something that's bigger than you? And is there a reason why this company has an exciting future so that a buyer will come along and go, yeah, I want that, as opposed to wanting a different one.
What are your thoughts on like the different types of, like, I know we're talking contractors here. So like,
Right.
are there different trades that you see doing better than others?
Yeah,
Just have
we've
a
had
brighter
many.
future.
Absolutely. So, yeah, well, Tom, we've had many clients in the construction industry, and it's hard to sell a contractor because in many, of course, you got licensing requirements, but in many situations, the barrier to entry is low. So someone will say, well, why should I buy your construction company when I can just hang a shingle across the street and get the licenses and start up, and I don't have to write a big check. So where contractors, where trade companies create value for buyers is when they have built something that a buyer can't get or doesn't want to wait years to recreate. So I'm going to begin to sound a little bit like a broken record. Number one is a team. Do you have a team? Really great people. Because if I want to own a construction company and you've got a team of really great people and I don't, you just gave me something I might write a check for. A specialty. If you're highly specialized, it could be the nature of the work that you do. Maybe you're the best, multifamily contractor in your market, or maybe you're building specialty structures, and your knowledge of your team and your reputation in your industry is so specialized that a buyer's like, there's value there in your brand and in your reputation. There's an old saying in investment banking is, can you build a moat around your business? Can you make it really hard for someone to get in or something to get out? When you've built a moat around your business because you've got a great team, you've got a great brand, you've got skills that are really hard to find in the marketplace, you've got a reputation in a certain market that carries a lot of positive value. Now that's a situation where someone's like, you've built something that I might want to write a check for.
You were talking about somebody being like, I'll just go across the street and hang my own shingle and do my own thing. And I think I'll just make up a number here. You could pay $1.5 million for another business, right? Or
Right.
you could start your own. I think you're paying the $1.5 million either way.
You are. It's just whether it's upfront or over time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because over time you got to figure it out. You got to recruit the team. You got to figure out your lead generation. You got to figure out your sales process, the fulfillment, all that other crap. Or you can just buy the one that's already doing that, drop it into your life, and you bring your own flair to it and culture and leadership, and
That's
you
right.
grow it because it's already proven. It has everything in place.
That's right. You're exactly correct.
I had a buddy during the Great Recession who he bought there was this like 50, 60-year-old painting company. He's a painter. And they basically were like, we're done. We're going to go out of business. And, I think they were just tired, right? And they weren't aggressive. I think he bought their database. After 50 years, he bought their database, which was nothing more than a bunch of bankers' boxes with files in them.
All right.
Back in, 2008 or whatever, 9. He bought it, I think, for $100,000. He just got it all. He went out, hired a bunch of part-time admin people to do data entry with all these years of like decades worth of customer lists. They sent him direct mail. He probably put in another $100,000 into this thing. Over the next 18 months, that little business that he bought and morphed into his own produced over another $1.5 million worth of business that was sitting right there under the former owner's nose.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, how often do you see something like that where like an underperforming business, somebody comes in and buys it and they're actually hungry and they're implementing things and it explodes because it has a 50-year-old name?
A lot of the times, because it's about, sometimes it's a question of how hungry are you, right? Sometimes it could be new buyer, right? Could be a new owner, could be a new generation. We talked a few minutes ago about family business. Could be a key employee who's just got a lot of fire in her or fire in him taking over. But it could be someone who sees a new way to leverage it. Hey, you've got information that I don't think you know what you've got under your nose, and we can take it and put it in the market. Or you've got skills in your organization. You guys are doing a great job for this type of customer and this type of market. we can take that and we can move it over here and with that type of customer and that type of market, and we can grow this exponentially. That happens all the time. It's why it often is really surprising for business owners when they're selling their company. I'm just going to make up some numbers. Let's say a guy wants to sell his business and the company's marketed to lots of buyers. And let's just say he gets 4 offers to buy the business, and one's for $5 million, one's for $6 million, one's for $7 million, and one's for $15 million. What the buyer who offered 15, do they not do math right? I mean, why are they offering 15 now? Every now and then it's a mistake on the buyer, but more often than that, the buyer sees something in that company and goes, we can use that in a way that nobody else either knows about or has the ability to leverage. And that's why sometimes you get those outlier offers, whatever the numbers are.
Yeah, that doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out which offer you'd take when you.
It does not. Does not.
Speaking of, what are some of the big mistakes that somebody makes when they're actually doing the deal? They got offers, they're, going through that whole process. What are some things that sellers do to hose themselves?
Number one, not have really good help. You need a good attorney, you need a good accountant, you need good advisors, and not just good people, but people who have done this before. Your buyer has expensive attorneys, expensive accountants, expensive lawyers, bankers. I realize we don't want to spend money if we don't have to, but you need to have a good team representing you. That's one common mistake, unfortunately. Another is losing sight of the fact that any dollar you don't get at closing is a dollar at risk. Buyers don't want to put all cash down at closing because it's risk for them. The seller takes all the money and walks away, and you may never see the seller again, and the buyer may fail to hold all that together. So buyers usually want to hold some dollars back, earn out employment agreements, non-compete agreements, that sort of stuff. Sellers, of course, it's a negotiation. It's a healthy tension, but sellers need to remember that any dollar you don't get at closing is a dollar you may never see, and they need to really push hard to get maximum cash at closing.
I got one more question, then I'm going to ask you to kind of share a little bit about your workshop here, because I get geek out on this all day, man. So is there a certain size business, contracting business, that you would say that you got to get to before you even consider selling? I'm just curious for those, because we got guys doing painting, we got GCs, you got handymen, you got all these different things, all crazy different job sizes. I'm just curious, is there like a rule of thumb?
It is a rule of thumb. There's going to be exceptions, but if you own a business, a contracting business, and frankly, many types of businesses, if your revenues are less than 5 million, you've got to have built something really special to get a buyer's attention. Now, there's exceptions, right? I just got done talking about the power of having a great team, a great brand, a great skill that maybe is hard to replicate in the market. So there are exceptions, but when it comes to creating value, when it comes to building something that is sellable, bigger is absolutely better. The market is pretty inefficient as you get smaller size. There's one important, alternative path. If your business is maybe below that 5 million rule of thumb, is that you might have key people on your team, a key guy, a couple key people working for you, and they want the business. Because they're in it, they're working in it, they know it, it's their job, right? And if they're 10, 20 years younger, and this is what they want to do the rest of their life, so you might have, if you're a smaller business, you might have your buyer already working for you. So that's an option that a lot of contractors usually should explore. But yeah, if you're below that 5 million rule of thumb, it can be really hard to get outside money's attention.
And what about the profit side of that 5 million? Where does somebody need to be?
Well, that's a great question, because as you know, most of the time when you're looking at privately held companies and you're looking at their income statement, I'm not going to see the full profit picture, right?
Right.
Because we got the owner's golf dues and cars and, family members on payroll and that stuff. But everybody does that. So that's when it's done right, it's usually not a problem. The point being is that somebody has to go through, it might be the accountant, it might be people like us, but somebody's got to go through the expenses and do what's called add backs. We add back into the picture those discretionary items that probably would never, those expenses that never would have occurred if I own the business rather than you owning it, right? But when you get through all that, a higher percentage profit margin is desirable because it says the company is running highly efficiently. You get too down low in the mid, single digits, and that's going to be, you're not going to stand out from the crowd. If you can get your net income percentage to 10% towards 20%, you're doing something really special. And then of course, even higher is even that much more remarkable.
Yeah, especially if you're not running the day to day, and
especially right.
You got a great team and all that stuff.
Yep.
So what are some of the highlights that you're going to cover at Mile High?
Great. We're going to talk about what's a happy exit look like, and we're going to talk about the difference between creating growth, revenue, profits, income, and creating value. And that's going to build a lot, Tom, on what we're talking about here today. What's the team have to look like? What's the plan for the company have to look like in the future? What are the steps you have to take in order to be able to go down that road? You were saying in the beginning of our time together that, yeah, you got to get up in the morning, you got to have passion, you got to have a commitment, you got to be willing to invest and do the work. But the payoff is fantastic. So we're going to talk the specifics and lay out specific steps for business owners, builders, all industries, but especially your industry, your conference, where the steps that you take to maximize value in your company, separate from and on top of growing it.
Separate and on top of, that's an interesting statement.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Well, so when people go to market, you probably hear that, there's multiple, what's my company worth, right?
Right.
And usually you'll hear an answer in terms of some sort of multiple on its financial performance. Like if you're a multiple of earnings would be most common. So what's a construction company worth? Obviously it's going to depend on the size and the type of construction company. But just for example, if someone says, well, your construction company might be worth 3 to 5 times earnings. That's the multiple, 3 to 5 times. Okay, great. If I hear that, let's assume that's an accurate insight. Who's getting a 3 and who's getting a 5? Yeah. I want to know the answer to that question. And so we're going to talk about how to maximize the value on top of growth, because you might have a construction company making $500,000 of profit, and I have a construction company making $500,000 of profit, but we're not going to sell this for the same price, right? Yeah. Odds are pretty good. One of our two companies is probably at the end of the day going to sell for a higher price. Well, why does that happen? Because there are characteristics of a business separate and apart from how much revenue it's done, separate and apart from how much profits are on the financial report that drive value to buyers, and those show up in the multiples.
So we're going to dig into the nitty-gritty of that.
We are.
That's good stuff. So if somebody wants to check out what you got going on and your company wants to reach out to you, how do they find you?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, the company that's relevant for this conversation is our exit planning business, which is called Navix, Navix, as in navigating towards exit. So the website's navixconsultants.com. And besides learning, being able to contact us and learning all about us, more importantly, there's lots of information on that website, articles, checklists, tools to download, all free for people specifically business owners who are thinking, one day I might want to have a successful exit. Here's a great place to start.
I love it. We'll make sure we drop the link in the show notes, and guys, go check that out. Educate yourself. Give Patrick a follow on the socials and stuff. And for God's sake, get your ass to Mile High Profit Summit, because we're going to be bringing some amazing things to you, going deep on how to really grow a profitable business that adds a ton of value to all involved. And Patrick, any closing thoughts before we wrap up today?
Mile High Summit's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to being there. I'm looking forward to working with you and your members.
Well, we're looking forward to having you out, and it's going to be a great event once again. So, guys, hit the links. Patrick, thanks so much for hanging with me here today.
Thanks,
And
Tom.
guys, share the show. Give us a rating and a review. You guys rock. We got to roll. We're out.